This is Long Way to the Top, and I'm your host, Shane Bryan. In the early 70s, the UK delivered a style of rock that included glitter, platform shoes, makeup and outlandish clothing. It was glam rock. T-Rex and Bowie embraced it, and before long it was literally on the top of the pops. One band was at the forefront, originally known as Sweet Shop, The Sweet, and then just Sweet. Brian, Steve, Mick and Andy, the classic lineup. Sadly, the passing of Brian, Steve and Mick, Andy Scott is left holding the torch, and Sweet are headed down under for their farewell tour, playing their greatest hits. Andy Scott here to chat with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be coming back. The last couple of times we've been in Oz, we've been doing the Rock the Boat trips.
Yes.
The cruises out into the Pacific, and they've been pretty good. Last one we did was actually one with Susie Quattro, but we also had the Angels and Russell Morris and Brian Cadd, and
I believe they all got up on stage with you.
They all did, yes. It was magnificent. It was a magnificent effort, in fact. Yeah.
There's a big Australian connection. I'll talk about that very shortly. You've had a bit of a love affair with Australia over the years too. You've been here several times. But the first thing that I have to ask, the hair. I mean, oh my God, I'm having hair envy here because you've got still the most incredible head of hair, even after all of these years.
Well, and it is real.
It is. I was going to say, what's the secret?
Yeah. No. Because there's a lot of people. I'm 15 years with prostate cancer.
Yeah.
And as part of the recuperation, my wife and I went to California for about 3 months.
Yeah.
And I stopped putting the Paul McCartney version of stuff to make your hair still look like the color it was in the 70s. I stopped doing that.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, a couple of months later, it's this colour, and my wife was quite envious. She said, "That's the colour I've been looking for all my life, and this is natural." And I can't probably look like a California beach bum, and was just
I'm actually impressed that it is the long golden locks and. Back then, I guess it would have, if you had that back then, it would have even been more outrageous on stage.
Yeah, true. But the length's still the same, and Brian had the blonde hair, if you remember.
Yes.
But his was always cut to his kind of collar. Yeah. More so. It was me and Mick that used to have the longer hair. When I got my prostate diagnosis in 2009, and I had in 2010 I had all the treatment. And as I said, 2011 we went on this sabbatical for a few months. We then I never lost my hair.
Yeah.
One of my friends, when he first heard about it, and he said, "Oh, you're having treatment," he said, "I guess the first thing we're going to have to do is when you come out is we'll go and shop for some hats." And I thought, well, there's the dark sense of humour that the Sweet have got,
Yeah.
And then, I didn't need it, and then he went completely bald. Don't wish to use those words, but he did. He lost all of his hair.
Yes.
And we're now I'm 15 years down the road, and it's still here.
Yeah.
I was expecting some kind of show of something disappearing, but I'm obviously getting on quite well. I've not had to have chemo yet,
right. Yeah.
But I'm on a very strong hormone, which there's been so much technology and so much progress in, if you've got a problem, go and see the oncologist right now, because there are so many things that can solve the problem very, very quickly.
Yes.
And here I am, 15 years later, still got me bonds and still able to put a guitar around my shoulder and sometimes make it sound good, you know.
I spoke to an oncologist friend of mine, and he said that the moment that you find out that you have it, you crack open a bottle of champagne because you've actually found it, and we can now do something about it.
Yeah, and I tell you, Australia as a country with its medical, you're at the forefront of a lot of things here. Yeah. One of my mates, Jim Keys, you know, from the Master's Apprentice, he's no longer with us, but he and I used to hook up and go off and get up to some stuff. But he, the last time, one of the last times I was there, actually on tour, not on the boat, which must be 8 years ago maybe. We got in his convertible car and we had to drive down the Pacific coast.
Yes.
He couldn't eat much because he was feeling a little bit, you know, he must have been he must have known something was coming. So we had ice cream and we had a lovely day.
Yeah.
And then I heard about a month later that he was no longer with us, and I was very saddened by that.
Sad loss. It is a really sad loss, and you know, Masters Apprentices, they were a great band. I mean, you did a lot of work with them touring around in the UK as well.
Yeah, no, I record. I didn't produce it, but I played on some of the re-records that he made when he was as Jim Keys, not as the Masters. You know, when that must have been in the 80s, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, he came over, and I've known him since then, you know.
Yeah, incredible. Now, there is a big connection to Australia. One of the big connections that we should mention, because that was kind of the start of the whole career, was Mike Chapman, who was, you know, I guess you could say that the band was very much guided by Nicky Chin and Mike Chapman. I think they were called Chinny Chap as a duo. But I guess they were like the 70s version of Stock Aitken and Waterman. They were responsible for you, Susie Quattro, Racy, Smokey. You can kind of see that sort of going through.
Well, Mike was a Brisbanean, but when we first met him in London, and remember, Sweet, they had not had any hits when they met Sweet.
Yeah.
And the record producer, Phil Wainman, was the catalyst. He brought them and us together. So the first hit that they ever had was our Funny Funny, a song called Funny Funny. Now, I knew Mike because he'd been in England for a number of years. He had a band called Tangerine Peel.
Tangerine Peel.
And I met him on a couple of TV shows with a band that I was in before Sweet.
Yeah.
And so when I saw him, I kind of went, "Oh, I kind of know you." And then I realised that, and he sounded like a Cockney. He's very much where he's living. He will adopt the position, you know, if you know what I mean.
I do have to say, Australians, when Australians are around English, we start to get an English accent. I don't know what it is. It's a very strong accent.
But having said that, they were in that initial stages. The band, remember, came from a different side of the business. We were a bit more rock heavy, into Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and Jimi Hendrix and the Yardbirds, and so fronting the singles, those early singles, didn't sit well, and Mike realised that, and to give him his credit, he started to write things that turned the corner. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you know, all the heavy guitars were behind the singles, and you know, all of a sudden you had Little Willie and Wigwam Bam and Blockbuster and Hellraiser and Ballroom Blitz and Teenage Rampage, the 16s. And then all of a sudden it was getting a little bit, let's say, crowded, for want of a better word. Certain bands and artists were starting to get signed by Nicky and Mike away from it all. Susie was one of them. I remember thinking when I first met her, you know, God, she's a little bit driven. And of course, the first single, you know, that she had went to number one, Can the Can.
Yeah.
And then they got involved with Mud and, as you say, Racy.
And
they
Smokey.
were also in California. Yeah. They kind of moved to California, which left us feeling a little bit, well, what's going to happen here? And the record producer, Phil, decided, well, we need an album, so we might as well just do it. So we did an album, and we'd written a lot of the songs on there, which didn't really impress Nicky and Mike because they came back. And this is when they wrote the 16s, which I think is the best thing that they've ever written for us.
Right.
That song.
Right.
But it had that California influence with it,
Yeah.
And it wasn't the biggest of hits. The record company, when we did the album, there was a version of Fox on the Run on that album, on the Desolation Boulevard album, and they said, this is a hit, but not the way it's been recorded.
Right. So
we snuck into a studio. Ian Gillan had just taken over a studio in London where a lot of hits had been made in the past. So Ian Gillan now had his own studio, and we were the first band to go in there, and we recorded Fox on the Run, which I produced, and the band we wrote, and it was the biggest hit that we'd had in a long, long time.
Yeah, it was certainly the biggest hit in Australia, for sure.
Yeah, and that's where the connection with Nicky and Mike kind of moved away a little bit. I've spoken to Mike several times, and he said, well, I have to tell you, he said, at the time when I heard it, I didn't want to like it, but he said I did because it was, I could hear it was a smash.
Yeah.
And I said, I learned a lot. Let's put it that way.
You wrote that song. That was one of the songs that you wrote. Where did the inspiration for Fox on the Run come from?
Well, the lyrics were put together as like more of a band effort. I knew what the chorus was going to be. But there had been, should we say, many a night where Brian, for example, we said, oh, yeah, we saw you with somebody last night. What was her name? He said, oh, I don't know. And it all kind of went from there. It's like, it doesn't matter what your name is, we like each other, and it's, you wouldn't get away with that today with all the stuff that's going on,
No, absolutely not. See, I knew it had nothing to do with wildlife. Well, not the wildlife that we know anyway. So let's just go back a step. You guys were, I guess, one of the foremost glitter bands that there were, glam rock bands that there were. But you wouldn't have been to the extent that you were. And I believe this is a quote that you said, without the influence of Mark Bolan.
Well, true. In 1971, we had released 3 singles in Germany, and they'd all been one had been number 1. They'd been, all in the top 5. Mark Bolan had also done something similar, but he'd been around for a year longer than us. He won the award of the top artist of the year, and we were the best newcomers. So we were at this award ceremony, and we're standing on stage with him. Now, we didn't think we were looking too bad, like a leather jacket and a pair of jeans and a fairly flash T-shirt and stuff like that. And he's there in all the finery with these sparkly jackets, a little bit of sprinkle on his face. His hair even had sprinkles in it. Now, he wasn't very tall, but he looked massive in that room because he was the one he had a persona.
Yeah.
So afterwards, we're in the bar in the hotel and we're chatting away, and he's got the same sense of humor. He's taking the piss, and we're all kind of going, come on, we've got to ask, do you get all your clothes made? He said, get a few things made, but he said the majority of stuff, and he gave us a shop, 2 shops in the King's Road. And he also said, if you want stuff, he said, there's a new store opened on Kensington High Street called Bieber. Go in there and buy yourself a starter kit of makeup, the glitter version. So we all went in there, and of course, we went overboard. It wasn't trying to be effeminate. We were like, all of a sudden, Steve's got an eye that looks like Clockwork Orange.
Yes.
And but only one. and the and I was using blue eyes and blue lips, you know, and you know it just got out of hand, and the teardrops, you know, falling off your eye, you know, it's as Mick Tucker put it, and I think this is the right way. Everybody else was trying to be androgynous, and we were just being the ugly sisters in the pantomime, you know.
And I mean, you know, I guess you could say it was a bit of shock value, but then I think a year later, Kiss went and took it to the completely next level. Did you sort of think maybe we better up the ante?
Well, Mike Chapman actually said when we were doing all of this in '73, he actually said, "Do you know something?" He said, "I think you could take this a stage further and become a bit more horror rock."
Yeah.
You know, and at the time, Nicky Chin wasn't having any of it. And we were still having hit records. So we were a bit concerned about giving up, you know, things like Hellraiser and Ballroom Blitz and maybe not disappearing, but going into an area where we were starting again.
Yes.
But he could have been right. It could have been great. We could have been following in Alice Cooper's, you know, steps and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
but I honestly think it would have taken a different singer.
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and there was an element in the music, you know, even with Hellraiser, that really could have lent itself to that. Very much so. Yeah. Yeah.
We really enjoyed playing, and when we were given the opportunity in '72 to kind of come together and play properly on the A-sides, and instead of what happened in '71, where orchestras and sessions were pulled together, and we were allowed to play little bits on the top or sing everything. I actually think that the whole thing got better. You know, all of a sudden, it didn't sound like the late '60s anymore. It sounded like a new band.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that, you know, from that point of view, that's when we all started to enjoy it. You know, all of us. You know, the producer. I didn't realize though. It's not until you hear things later on that the producer did not like Nicky Chin.
Right.
And Mike Chapman ended up hating Nicky Chin.
Yeah, 25. I don't think they spoke for about 25 years.
Oh, I think it went deeper than deep. You know.
You came from the prog rock scene. I mean, how did you feel going to more of that pop rock sort of vibe? Did you struggle?
Well, look, whichever way you look at it, you can say I'm in it because I want the music to be right, which was my part in Sweet. I have to admit, it was me who kept the music right on stage, and you know, there has to be somebody who's kind of pushing that along. You know, you've got a bass player who is a little bit lazy, but a great bass player and singer, but doesn't want to get involved with organising stuff. Mick would like to organise, but he doesn't know how to arrange things in a musical sense. He'll say, "Why don't I do a 2-bar drum break there?" You know, that was his input.
Yeah.
And Brian, who basically just wanted to be a pop star.
Yeah.
So you've got all the elements there of knowing that you can turn the corner here. And Brian knew Deep Purple really well. He used to share a flat with Roger Glover, the bass player. And I knew Ian Gillan from before, when his band and we used to play colleges together. So looking at it from that point of view, Brian had somebody that he could not maybe look up to, but had somebody that he could relate to.
Yeah.
So when we were looking to change from that pop thing into the glam rock thing, and then into slightly something more progressive, ending up with Love Is Like Oxygen, you have to look at it all as a progression, not just in one piece. Yeah. And I think that we all had this thing in mind that we've been striving for so long. Here is an opportunity to put what we can do in front of an audience.
Yeah.
And you know something, the Germans got it straight away, because we were going on stage and playing a little bit more heavy stuff and playing a couple of the singles at the end, you know, like sometimes we'd start with the hit single and then do all this other stuff and then finish with another single that we'd had as a hit, and then using that hit single that we've got at the moment as the encore.
Yeah.
You know, it would be but the basis of the set was not based around, you know, the sing-along, you know, pop songs.
Yes.
It kind of seemed to work. I think the UK pigeonholed us a little bit. We're forever seen as that moment on Top of the Pops where Steve's got a little black moustache and a German helmet, you know.
Yes.
And the rest of us are mucking about, you know.
That's how legends were made, really. I mean, you know, that's what people remember.
Yeah.
Now, you know, you mentioned Love Is Like Oxygen, and I was going to talk about this towards the end, but I've got to say, you know, yes, it was the end of I guess the classic lineup that we remember, but in some ways, I feel it was the pinnacle of, and it should have been a bigger hit than what it was.
Yeah, it was a hit everywhere.
Yeah,
it was a number one in some places. I think it broke the top 10 in England. UK. I don't know what it did in Australia. It must have broken the top 10.
Got to about 9, I think it was, in Australia.
Yeah. Similar over here, and a lot of Europe had it in the top 5. Germany number 1.
Yeah, because they got it.
Sweden,
yeah.
Sweden might have been number 1.
Yeah,
you know, but America top 10, I think 11 maybe, something like that. And the album was dragged up the Billboard chart into the top 50 as well.
Yeah,
which was good news. But by that time, the band was starting to the original band was starting to get a bit threadbare at the seams. You know, there was I've realised Steve did not want to be touring really. Brian was a bit of a mess. That's the only way of describing it. We all wanted him to get back to what he could do, but when alcohol's involved, it's like trying to. What is it? There's this old saying of, it was as difficult as trying to get a drunk woman up the stairs and put her to bed, you know. And it was like that with Brian.
Yeah,
you know, getting him. The number of times we were on stage, and you could see by the second song he wasn't sure where he was. And we've had road managers come on stage and grab him and take him off and just say, sit down here, have a cup of coffee, while we did a couple of songs without him. And then we're looking to the side and they're going like that. He's not coming back on.
Yeah.
You know, and it can't continue like that, you know. It just can't continue. It's got to pull itself together at some point. And it wasn't until all the big record company executives and it was Birmingham, Alabama. It was a second to last show, Birmingham, and then I think we were doing Atlanta, Georgia, and that was the end of the tour with Bob Seger. I think Bob Seger, as management or their tour manager, had basically told our management that something was wrong and going on. Yeah. And then I got the phone call to say, don't tell anybody, but we're all going to be there in Birmingham. And I said, well, I need to tell him. And he said, no, I want to see what's happening.
Yeah.
If you tell him, you know, and I went, well, that's being a bit sneaky and stuff. And he said, no, we just want to, as if we walked in off the street. So I had to keep my trap shut, which I wasn't happy about. Yeah. But they arrived and they saw probably the worst gig that we'd done in ages, where Brian walked on stage, didn't even know where he was. I thought he was going to fall off the front at one point. And he's still staggering about while we're trying to do the beginning of Action.
Yeah.
And my manager was on the side of the stage. Nobody knew he was there, only me. And he rushed on stage and dragged him off. And we did the set without him. We had a shortened set because there were a couple of songs that we couldn't do without him. We came off. and I could still hear the shouting in one of the dressing rooms, from the stage, never mind coming off stage. And I just got the hell out of there. Me and Steve got in a car and went back to the hotel. Following morning, there was a big rumpus meeting at the breakfast. Brian wasn't there, and they were kind of saying something's got to change here. We were due to do some more dates with people like Journey and Cheap Trick and people like that. And they said, we're pulling all the dates out because they said, well, you're going to do Atlanta tomorrow, and that's it. And somebody will keep an eye on him. He will do the gig. He's been given an ultimatum. And I went, but it's our band. It's up to us to give him the ultimatum, isn't it? So anyway, we came off the road. We then went into a place where we were used to rehearsing a small castle. It was called a castle down in the Forest of Dean in the West Country, towards South Wales. Took a mobile down there, started recording stuff for the next album. And we're not giving him difficult keys and stuff like that, but he's not able to. We tried to do some demoing so that the people could hear, and it was just not good enough. So he was taken away and put in a drying out place. Total, And about a month later, we started again in London with the stuff we'd been recording down in in this castle. And he came in, and he still wasn't able to get anywhere near what we were trying to do. And it was coming up towards Christmas, and I said, we can't make a bloody decision now. But there was a vote taken, and everybody, I said, it has to be unanimous. And everybody kind of said, well, unless something drastically changes, we've got to find somebody else. And there was this meeting, wasn't pleasant. And then we went into the studio again in the new year, and I said, Ronnie James Dio would like to come and give it a go with us.
Wow.
And Steve, the bass player, said, look, we've done it as just the three of us in the past. I think we should continue like this. He said, you and I will do lead vocals. And I wasn't very pleased about that, because my next move would have been, well, I'm leaving then and joining up with Ronnie Dio.
Yeah.
But I didn't, because I realized, because I talked this through with my manager and said, if I leave, he said, if you leave, the band disintegrates.
Yeah.
So I stayed, and we did another album. And from then onwards, we never really had much success other than in places like Germany, Austria, Switzerland, a little bit of Scandinavia. It kind of not fell apart, but we were still doing good gigs.
Do you regret? Do you regret it? Not
what, getting rid of moving Brian on, or
no? Do you regret not joining with Ronnie? Yeah. Well,
you can't. I'm a believer that you can't have regrets. If you have regrets, then you should have done it.
Yeah.
So you move on and you let it go. It's like when I was producing and writing songs, and the band, Mick and I were getting the band back together to go on the road and come to Australia. I had a phone call from a guy in Tom Schultz's research and development place, who used to be Sammy Hager's tour manager. And this guy rang me up and he said, you don't fancy coming over and trying out for Boston, do you?
Wow.
They want somebody with a really, really high voice. This third album has been taking forever, and one of the guys has just been fired or moved on. And I thought, I don't want to give up what I'm doing now for Boston. That isn't. I know it's not going to survive beyond this. Yes, I could go and do finish the album with them and maybe do one tour, but I didn't.
Yeah,
and I don't regret that either. And very nice of people like Tom Schultz. Every time they developed something, they sent me a copy of what like a Rockman or all their various things that they were developing for the studio.
Just in case you went, oh, hang on, I could probably do that.
Yeah.
Now
I think we're coming to a point where
Yes.
the next in line is waiting for me.
All right, I will. We'll wrap this up. You've got obviously we're touring Australia, and you've got a fantastic new lineup. I'll have all the dates. November, you're heading down under. You're doing all of the states except for Tasmania. Sadly.
Yeah. Well, there was a moment when we could have gone to Tasmania, but because some of the gigs have sold out, we're going back to Melbourne, to the Crown, and doing another show there. And somebody said that the logistics just weren't right to go to Tassie on this one.
Well,
I love Tasmania.
We can fly over and see you. Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Andy Scott, thank you for being so generous with your time.
No problem. Thanks, Shane.
Cheers.
Bye, mate.
See ya. Hit plus or follow to subscribe to the podcast, and head over to Facebook at The Long Way to the Top Podcast and give us a like. Keep on rocking, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Long Way to the Top.